Never fall in love because it could absolutely destroy you. This past week in my youth group class, we did a lesson on Samson and Delilah, and we've been in this study called God Over, and it's where we talk about God being over different aspects of our life, our family, our money, our old life, how God is over all of it. And this week is no different. This week we talked about how God is over romance, and we looked at the story of Samson and Delilah. And Samson and Delilah is just such a good story, and we're going to go ahead and get into it right off the bat. It starts off really in Judges chapter 13. And to give you some context, in Judges chapter 13, the Israelites are under Philistine oppression again. Okay, and an angel appears to this barren woman, Samson's mother, and he tells her that she's going to give birth to a son. This boy is to be a Nazarite from birth. It means he's going to be set apart for God. This includes not drinking any wine, never having unclean food, never touching dead things, and never cutting his hair. All those things were off limits for Nazarite. By the way, Nazarite and Nazarenes are different things. They sound the same, and it might confuse people. You might be like, does that mean he's from Nazareth? It doesn't mean he's from Nazareth. Totally different thing. But that's what a Nazarite is. He can't drink wine. He can't have unclean food, can't touch dead things, can't cut his hair. They were set apart for God. The angel says Samson's going to begin to deliver Israel from the Philistines. That's what this prophecy about this Samson guy is. Now, Samson's life was God-ordained and purpose-driven from the very beginning. And we see that in Judges 13. He wasn't an accident. Samson was chosen. And then we get to chapter 14, some more context. You see a little bit about Samson's first marriage. Here are some red flags. You're going to see a bunch of red flags in Samson's life. And here's where it starts. You see this portion where Samson sees this Philistine woman in a place called Timnah. And he demands that his parents arrange this marriage against their wishes and against God's law because they weren't to marry Philistines. And on the way to visit this woman, he kills a lion with his bare hands. It's this crazy story. Go read it. He later eats honey from the lion's carcass. He breaks his Nazarite vow not to touch dead things by eating the honey out of this lion's carcass. At the wedding, Samson tells a riddle, and he loses a bet because his wife pressures him to reveal the answer to the riddle, which she shares with the Philistines. That's a big red flag. Maybe there were more red flags before this moment, but that's a big red flag. You have Samson and the Israelites, then you got the Philistines, and he intermarries with them, and then he has this riddle. He has this weird riddle, whatever it is, and he has the answer, and his wife brings it out of him. She pulls this answer out of him, and then gives the answer to the Philistines, and then he loses the bet. And he's enraged because of this circumstance. He's enraged because this happened. He ends up killing 30 Philistines to pay the debt and leave his wife. Her father then gives her to another man, which angers Samson even more. What's the takeaway of chapter 14? Samson is impulsive. He's driven by desire, and he already shows signs of compromise, especially in choosing relationships outside of God's boundaries. Okay, so we're getting a little bit of Samson's character. He's an impulsive guy. He's driven by, I want it, I'm going to go get it. That's the kind of guy he is. And that's his personality. And then we get to chapter 15, and this series of events unfolds even more. It says Samson returns for his wife and finds that she's been given away. So in revenge, he catches 300 foxes, he ties torches to their tails, and he burns the Philistine fields. He burns the Philistine fields. Like, I would love to picture this. How did he catch 300 foxes? How did he attach torches to their tails? And then what would it look like if 300 foxes ran throughout these fields and caught them all on fire? What would that look like? Such a strange story. The Philistines end up retaliating by killing his wife and her father. Samson gets angry again, strikes back, and kills even more Philistines. Later, the Israelites hand Samson over to the Philistines to keep the peace. They're basically the Israelites are basically like, look, take Samson. He's caused enough issues. Just take him. We don't want to deal with him anymore. But Samson ends up breaking free, and he kills 1,000 Philistines with a donkey's jawbone. This is who Samson is. Now, if you don't know anything else about Samson, he has like super strength. He's like Superman, so he can't fly and he doesn't have laser vision, but he's got super strength, and it comes from his hair. And so when you think of it like that, all this, Samson killing 1,000 Philistine men doesn't sound that crazy. But that's what happens. And then we get to chapter 16, and this is where Samson's downfall begins to unravel. This is where things get crazy. This is where you begin to think Samson is even more of an idiot than you already thought from the previous chapters. Because it's red flag after red flag after red flag. And he ignores all of them. But this is the story of Samson and Delilah. We're going to go ahead and look at chapter 16, verse 4. It says, sometime later he fell in love with a woman named Delilah who lived in the Sorek Valley. The Philistine leaders went to her and said, persuade him to tell you where his great strength comes from so that we can overpower him, tie him up, and make him helpless. Each of us will then give you 1,100 pieces of silver. So you got this woman named Delilah, and Samson falls in love with her. The Philistine leaders see this as an opportunity to destroy Samson. Think of all the history they have. All the Philistines that Samson's killed, the Philistines at the wedding, the 1,000 Philistines after he was taken captive. Think of all that history there. So the Philistine leaders see this as an opportunity. We're gonna get our payback. Revenge is coming. Samson fell in love with this Delilah girl, who's another Philistine. And these Philistine leaders tell Delilah, you're going to get this information from him. We want to know why he's so strong. We want to know why he's so strong and how we can make him like anybody else so that we can ambush him, tie him up, and kill him. And if you do it, we'll give you 1,100 pieces of silver. I don't know what the modern equivalent of that would be, but I would assume it's quite a bit of money. But that's what they tell her. So Delilah said to Samson, verse 6, please tell me, where does your great strength come from? How could someone tie you up and make you helpless? Which should be a red flag. Why does Delilah want to know this? How long has he known Delilah at this point? It can't have been that long. Why does she want to know? That should be a red flag. But Samson told her, if they tie me up with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I will become weak and be like any other man. So the Philistine leaders brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she tied him up with them. While the men in ambush were waiting in her room, she called out to him, Samson, the Philistines are here. But he snapped the bowstrings as a strand of yarn snaps when it touches fire. The secret of his strength remained unknown. So here's the big red flag. This woman that you fell in love with just tried to get pertinent information that would lead to your downfall from you. Yes, you lied to her, but she got these 7 bowstrings, she tied you up, and then she planned an ambush against you. That should be a big red flag. Like, that should be a big red flag. But that's what happened. And he continues on, verse 10. Then Delilah said to Samson, you have mocked me and told me lies. Won't you please tell me how you can be tied up? He told her, if they tie me up with new ropes that have never been used, I will become weak and be like any other man. So Delilah took new ropes, tied him up with them, and shouted, Samson, the Philistines are here. But while the men in ambush were waiting in a room, he snapped the ropes off his arm like a thread. Then Delilah said to Samson, you have mocked me all along and told me lies. Tell me how you can be tied up. So here's red flag number 2. She just did it again. Samson, leave her. Leave her. I feel like I'm watching a bad soap opera. Leave her. She doesn't like you, bro. She just wants money. Leave her. Verse 13, then Delilah said to Samson, you have mocked me all along and told me lies. Tell me how you can be tied up. So he told her, if you weave the 7 braids on my head into the fabric on a loom, which a loom is like, it's an ancient way of sewing. It's like this machine that you can kind of weave fabrics together. And so he's like, if you can tie me up or weave my hair within this loom, then I'll be like anybody else. So she fastened the braids with a pin and called to him, Samson, the Philistines are here. He awoke from a sleep and pulled out the pin with the loom in the web. How can you say I love you, she told him, when your heart is not with me? This is the third time you have mocked me and not told me what makes your strength so great. Because she nagged him, this is so funny, because she nagged him day after day and pleaded with him until she wore him out, he told her the whole truth and said to her, my hair has never been cut because I am a Nazirite to God from birth. If I am shaved, my strength will leave me and I will become weak and be like any other man. I find it funny that he finally caved when she nagged him to death. Men, if you're watching out there, never marry a nag. If you're dating a nag, just save yourself some heartache, some headache. Just don't do that. That's not a good idea. But she nags him day after day, pleads with him to get this information from him, and finally, after all this nagging, after all this time, he finally breaks down and tells her, listen, I'm a Nazirite. I can't have my hair cut. That's where my strength comes from. He finally tells her the truth. When Delilah realized that he had told her the whole truth, she sent this message to the Philistine leaders, come one more time, for he has told me the whole truth. So the Philistine leaders came to her and brought the silver with them. The silver that they promised her earlier if she could get this information. Then she let him fall asleep on her lap and called a man to shave off the 7 braids on his head. In this way, she made him helpless and his strength left him. Then she cried, Samson, the Philistines are here. When he awoke from his sleep, he said, I will escape as I did before and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. Man, that's a line right there. That's a painful thing to have experienced. He did not know that the Lord had left him. Imagine what Samson is thinking at this point. He's with this woman he has no business being with. Surely he knows that. She's tried to deceive him and plan these ambushes against him 3 times. And finally, after nagging and nagging and nagging, he finally tells her the truth. You wake up to Delilah screaming, Samson, they're here. And you wake up and you think that you're going to solve the same issue like you always had by relying on your own strength. And then you realize, wait a second, it's not there anymore. The strength that I was given by God that has kept that's kept through my hair being long or whatever it is, that's gone. That has to be like a heart-sinking moment. A moment it's just like, oh, wait a second, I really messed up this time. Verse 21, the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes. They brought him down to Gaza and bound him with bronze shackles, and he was forced to grind grain in prison. But his hair began to grow back after it had been shaved. Now the Philistine leaders gathered together to offer a great sacrifice to their god Dagon. They rejoiced and said, our God has handed over our enemy Samson to us. When the people saw him, they praised their God and said, our God handed over to us our enemy who destroyed our land and who multiplied our dead. When they were in good spirits, they said, bring Samson here to entertain us. So they brought Samson from prison, and he entertained them. They had him stand between the pillars. So imagine Samson is in prison, he's grinding grain, all this stuff, and they bring him out. He's shackled because he has no strength. His hair is all cut off, and his eyes are gouged out. They bring him out to mock him, to laugh at him. And he stands between these 2 pillars. Verse 26, Samson said to the young man who was leading him by the hand, lead me where I can feel the pillars supporting the temple so that I can lean against them. The temple was full of men and women. All the leaders of the Philistines were there, and about 3,000 men and women were on the roof watching Samson entertain them. He called out to the Lord, Lord God, please remember me, strengthen me just one more time with one act of vengeance. Let me pay back the Philistines for my 2 eyes. Samson took hold of the two middle pillars supporting the temple and leaned against them, one on his right and the other on his left. Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." He pushed with all his might, and the temple fell on the leaders and all the people in it, and those he killed at his death were more than those he had killed in his life. Then his brothers and all his fathers finally came down, carried him back, and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of his father Manoah. So he judged Israel for 20 years. This is the story of Samson and Delilah. And just to recap, you got Samson who falls in love with this Philistine woman named Delilah. She tries to deceive him 3 times, really 4 times, but 3 times to try to get the truth from him. And over again, he ends up lying. Oh, it's if you tie my hair into a loom, if you use these bowstrings, if you use rope that's never been used, if you do all these things, I won't have any more strength left. And then she finally gets the truth from him, and it backfires. Of course, we all know this would happen. She deceives him. He's captured. He's taken into prison. And then there's this big party to their god Dagon because they're so hyped because they finally got Samson, who has destroyed so many Philistine men and women. Just destroyed people, destroyed their crops, destroyed their livelihoods. He's just done so much damage to the Philistines. And so they finally get him. They bring him out to mock him, to laugh at him. And then finally, with one last act of strength, he knocks over these pillars and destroys this building along with all the Philistines inside. And there are a few points that really pop out to me as I read this story. The first one is this. I kind of mentioned it at the very beginning of the lesson. And it's don't fall in love. Matter of fact, never fall in love. Never, ever, ever, ever fall in love. Instead, walk into love with wisdom. This is the best dating advice I could ever give to anybody. Never fall in love. Instead, walk into love with wisdom. Because you got to realize we've been taught this idea of falling in love since we were kids watching Disney Channel with movies like Cinderella and Tangled and Sleeping Beauty and Snow White. And you have these stories where you have these 2 people who meet under strange circumstances, and against all odds, they end up falling in love. And of course, at the end of these movies, they lived happily ever after. And we've been taught that love looks the same way, and that someday we're going to fall in love, defy all odds, and we're going to live happily ever after. But I'm here to tell you today, the real world doesn't work like that. The real world doesn't work like that. You don't believe me? Then why has this culture that we live in, who has been taught for decades to fall in love, why do we have a divorce rate of 50%? 50%. It's almost like we're gambling with marriage. Why? Because we've been taught to approach love and dating relationships and romance and marriage in a way that's impulsive and reckless, and quite frankly, it's stupid. It's stupid. It's often no more than, well, is she pretty? Do we like the same things? And is she fun to be around? And then we don't think past that. It's just that. Do we enjoy being around her in the dating phase of our life? And if so, then let's get married. That's a terrible way to approach marriage. That's a terrible way to approach romance and dating. It's dumb. I mean, think about it. It doesn't make any sense. Think about how important this is. Outside of faith, outside of where you place your faith, there's no decision that's more important than who you decide to get married to. There's nothing more important than that. Why? Because it's going to affect your life in a lot of ways. And not only that, it's going to affect the lives of your children. And this is what I wish young people would think more about. Like, as I've gotten older, the dating advice that I give to my students is like, first date, do you love Jesus? Like, do you really, really love him? And you talk about faith. And then you talk about the big things of life. Where do you line up politically? Where do you line up in terms of faith? Where do you line up? And when it comes to how to raise a family, what principles do you stand on? Start there. Worry about what movies you like and what kind of music you guys like and this, that, and the other. Worry about that later. It doesn't matter. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. But we start with these things that don't matter and then try to build a relationship on top of it and then are confused when it crumbles away 3 months later or 2 years later. And imagine the time that people waste dating somebody that they have no business dating because they didn't start with the big issues. They started with what kind of movies do you like and try to build a relationship off that. Never fall in love. Don't do it. Instead, walk into love with wisdom and discernment. And here's what's funny. Falling in love, falling implies a lack of control. Like when I trip and fall, I don't have any control over what's happening. Not any real control. I'm falling. But walking implies intent. I'm making a conscious decision to love this person. Walking into love implies level-headedness. I'm going to be smart with how I love this person and how I let this person love me back. Walking into love implies self-control. I'm going to control my emotions so that I can make wise decisions. Never fall in love. Always walk into love with discernment. Always walk into love with discernment. Point number 2, compromise leads to captivity. Compromise leads to captivity. Within this story of Samson and Delilah, you've got this portion of text where she's nagged him for so long, and she should wear him down and worn him down, and he finally just tells her the truth. And he compromises. And where did it lead him? It led him to literal captivity. And the same is true with dating. The same is true with relationships. When we compromise on our moral boundaries, when we compromise on our morals, it ends up leading to captivity. Not a physical captivity like in this story, but a spiritual captivity. And I can tell you from experience, because there have been relationships that I had no business being in, that I've been in, and I've ended up compromising morally, and it led me to no other place than guilt and shame and loneliness and sorrow and grief. Is a place that one of the darkest of my entire lives, because I compromised. I had boundaries when I first went into this relationship, and I caved. And I gave in. And it turned out to lead me to a spiritual captivity. So if you're young out there and you're dating and you're beginning to think about that, or maybe you're older and you're dating, whatever it is, don't compromise on your boundaries. Don't compromise on your morals. Just don't. It's not worth it. It'll only lead to captivity. Point 3, when God is the focus, red flags become more clear. When God is the focus, red flags become more clear. Look at this story here. Samson wasn't worried about God within this relationship. He was worried about Delilah, but I would even go further. He was worried about himself. He wanted himself to be happy, to feel pleasure, whatever it is. Like he was worried about himself, and because of that, all these red flags that came through his life, all these times Delilah blatantly and explicitly deceived him and even planned ambushes against him, all these red flags were ignored. Why? Because he wasn't worried about himself. He wasn't worried about God. He was worried about himself. He was worried about himself. And so these red flags got ignored. But what you'll find is that when you put God as the focus in your relationships, when you put God as the focus of your marriage, of your dating relationship, whatever it is, when you put God as the focus, the red flags become a lot more clear. Because instead of worrying about what she wants or what he wants, instead of worrying about what you want, you're just worried about what God wants. And anything that doesn't line up with that just needs to go. It becomes a lot more simple when we put God in the center of our relationship. When God is the focus, the red flags become more clear. And this is my last point, point number 4. God gives mercy to those who seek it. And this is something that I think needs said. This is something that I wish everybody could hear. It said God gives mercy for those who seek it. Look at the story of Samson and Delilah. Samson made all these horrible mistakes, but what happened at the end of his life? He asked for his strength back one more time. And he was given it. But here's the thing. There are many of us in life who didn't walk into love with wisdom. We fell in love and we were just out of control. And there were many people who compromised on their morals and their boundaries, and it led to a place of seclusion and guilt and shame. There were many people out there who didn't keep God as the focus, and the red flags weren't clear, and they ended up making mistake after mistake after mistake because God wasn't the focus. They were worried about themselves. They were worried about their partner. And if that's you, it's not over. There's still tomorrow. And there's still time to turn around and make more godly decisions. There's still time to do it the way that God wants you to do it. Because God gives mercy to those who seek it. And what a beautiful thing is that. Like, what a beautiful thing that is to have a second chance. To come to the Father and say, you know what? I made a huge mistake. And I see why I'm wrong now. I see why it was a terrible idea. I get it now. I'm ready to do it your way. And then to have a Father who's like, you know what? I'll allow it. I accept that. Not only do I accept it, but I love it. That's such a wonderful thing. But God gives mercy to those who seek it. My prayer is that if you're in a dating relationship, or maybe you just know somebody who is in a dating relationship, that you can benefit from this lesson. And that you can hear this lesson and learn from it and grow from it and be impacted by it. Because again, there's nothing more important outside of where your faith is. There's nothing more important than who you end up marrying, who you end up being with. It'll affect your life directly. It'll affect your children's lives directly. It'll affect your grandchildren's lives directly. There's no more important decision than this outside of where your faith is. So if you are dating, apply these to your life. Apply these points to your life. If you know somebody who is dating, who is at this point, maybe bring these points up and talk to them and say, like, hey, have you thought of this? Because this is something that I heard and it just kind of made sense and kind of important to think about. Have you thought about this? Because man, it will drastically change your life. That's my prayer for you. Tight lines.